my browser and make sure that it is going on LinkedIn, and it looks like it is.
Oh, perfect.
So, welcome everybody. Hi, Kimberly. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this discussion and love what you guys do. So I'm happy to be here.
Yay. Well, welcome everybody. We're talking about today navigating the return, empowering mothers in the workplace. This is a conversation that is near and dear to my heart. And I know Kimberly obviously as well. Let's get going. My name is Lauren. I'm the head of community at Maple. We're a household management app, and we are the very best way for parents to stay organized. Kimberly Didrikson over at Learning Motherhood is with us today. She is an expert and an advocate in this field. Kimberly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways I could take this, but simply put, I'm a mom of three. I had two of my babies in corporate America. I spent 15 years in corporate America and now work with corporate America to change the experience that parents have through the transition onto parental leave and back from parental leave. Um, Let me see. Is there anything else really important there?
No, I think that's perfect. And I think that's a good sort of segue into the first question, which is how did your own experience returning to work after motherhood really inspire you to start doing this professionally?
Yeah, so I started having kids later on in life. And so my professional career was pretty established. I was a young manager at the time, like I was in a leadership role. And it sort of, was on this career trajectory that, having children, they were just going to come along with me on it.
Yeah.
Um, and there were so many resources for career development and just kind of the things like to get me to where I wanted to be in terms of aspirations for my career. But I was so shocked after having a baby, how lost I felt, how different I felt as a human, and everything that I thought parenting was going to be was so different. I just was in the dark. And even though I knew parents, because we had kids later on in life, it just felt like no one talked about it. No, it was not an open discussion. Information wasn't shared. And it was sort of like you power through. And I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean we power through? Like, how do we have all these resources and support for so many things, but not this?
Yeah.
And so, it really started, I would say, when I went to go look at my parental leave benefits and was shocked that it was like, um, here's what you get at a federal level, but anything else, go figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, which I thought was kind of sad, like how is so either you do that research or you don't do that research and you don't get access to what you need. So after my experience with my first son, and I have these emails of me being like, this isn't right, like sharing it with some other people and going, I can't believe that this is how parents are supported through this transition. And just it was like a spark then. And then after having our third child is when we really started up and said, okay, I'm doing something about this now.
I love that. I totally agree that there's a loss of identity that happens specifically for women when they go through that transition of like from woman to mother. And we don't talk about that enough. And I also think that here in America, there is not a lot of infrastructure to support new parents in the workplace. I know at a federal level, there are some job protections, but that is only for certain types of organizations and certain types of work. And at a state level, there's not a lot of states that protect your job. And there's not a lot, again, not a lot of support. So I think it's really wonderful what you're doing. Do you want to talk about some of the common challenges that mothers often encounter when re-entering the workplace and then sort of how to navigate those effectively?
Yeah, so you mentioned one right off the bat that's very common that sort of shocks us, shocked me, um, is the identity shift that happens after becoming a parent and
Yeah.
actually adding the title mother to
Yep.
your resume, to who you are as an individual. You know, it's so funny, like now, like when someone asked me yesterday who I was, like outside of titles. And it's just so interesting because like we are so programmed to go mother and employer, like where do you work? Like
That's so
those are
true.
the things that come up. And so prior to baby, it was like, where do you work? What is your position? You know, and that's sort of like that whatever water cooler happy hour. You know, now it's like on a soccer field, whatever it is, like
Yeah.
that's the thing that identifies you. And so when you add that title mother and you're somehow so attached to the title you were before, they feel conflicted because
Yeah.
the priority is different now. But you still care. You still
Of
care
course.
about your job, but your priorities have shifted. And I think that's a real big struggle for women. It's like, hey, you know, I still want to be a great employee. I still need the income or I want to continue my career, but I feel so different. How can I show up and be that employee that they saw prior to baby after baby? I'm different now. And there's the struggle internally because of that, which causes one of the other things that I think happens is a lack of confidence in who we are. And
Yes.
so when we go back to work and we were, you know, maybe considered a high performer, um, we excelled at whatever position we had, and we come back, we feel like we can't meet the standard that we created before. So
Mhm.
there's a lack of confidence that starts to evolve. And so we work
Yes.
harder and we burn ourselves out because we're trying to do it all, but there's
Yes.
no way we can do it all.
Yes. I also, you know what I also was thinking while you were talking, Kimberly, is that there is a time period after you become a mother, after you become a father, and you go back into the workplace, and like it's too soon most times. You have a tiny, tiny infant at home who is now, you're carrying this infant for 40 weeks in most cases, and you deliver and you have this new baby in the world, and you only get a couple of weeks for most parents in America to bond and sort of get into this new routine, which totally upends life as you knew it. And then you're running back to the workplace, and it's like nobody has adapted. Everybody is absolutely exhausted, and that exhaustion I hate to say it, like continues for a
Yeah.
long time. And the expectation is that you are just going to hop back to it, and you literally can't. I mean, for a lot of mothers, you're still physically not anywhere near having being able to be in the workplace comfortably. A lot of women are pumping. A lot of women are, they still have stitching, they still have stitches, they still have pain. I mean, it's it's different. It's a completely different scenario. And I think that there are barriers that organizations need to address to help parents better acclimate, specifically mothers. Do
Yeah,
you want to
absolutely.
talk about those at all?
Yeah, and I want to add like just a couple more things that are common there just to get those in for any
Yes.
employer listening.
Yeah.
um, so I want to also add, and I have notes on here because I didn't want to forget them. Trust in childcare is an anxiety
Totally.
producing experience,
Totally.
especially when you've been home with baby. So even leaving, whether a mom wants to go back to work or not, that experience of leaving baby with someone else, it's top of mind and it's constant there. So building that trust is an issue when you first transition because you're like newly going through that. And so anxiety is high. And
Yes.
then the other component of that is lack of support for home, at home for work. Like the household component of home is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So all the things that Maple really helps
Yeah.
support, because there's going back to what we were talking about with parental leave needs to be for all. Dad or partner, the non-birthing partner, usually goes back to work earlier. And
Yes.
so a lot of those household responsibilities fall on the individual that's home for longer for parental leave. And
So
so when the
true.
shift comes and they both go back to
Yep.
work, they're both at work, the household responsibilities don't shift, they
Yeah.
stay the same. And
Yes.
so there's a drain from just that component.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say is you're also, a lot of mothers, and it's hard to admit, are going through postpartum depression. And it's
Totally.
something they don't want to share. So I want to make sure I said all of them because, and there's
I,
more, but those are like the top ones because I feel like there's a miss to your point. It's like we go back to work, but yeah, I'm looking at you at a screen, but all of that other stuff is happening in my head.
it's so true. And I love that you brought it up because when I went back to work 4 weeks after my baby was born, um, I had a really wonderful woman who is now a mother to her own children. And she stayed with my baby. And I was so anxious about it that I was leaving on my lunch breaks, driving home to check in. And I constantly had the Nest camera on my phone, on my desk, so I could watch. And I just remember, I mean, now, because hindsight's, 2020, I remember looking back and, or now I'm looking back and I'm thinking, I was not ready. I was so anxious all the time. I couldn't even think about work because just being away from my baby was very scary. And I love that you brought up the household aspect because that is a huge one. And I was going to talk about that in the barriers that
Yeah.
parents face, but absolutely. It's a really good conversation to have with your partner before baby comes, if you can. It's never a bad time. It's just, I think, the easiest time because you're not so sleep deprived and you can actually sit down and you're calm and you don't have a screaming baby that you're so worried about. And just really talk about who does what, and in those sort of initial weeks or months, how that might have to change for a bit, and how you might have to seek outside support. And what are you doing to stay on the same page, the two of you? And what sort of software or tools are you using inside your household? And that's the perfect time to get an app like Maple, where it's really helping you collaborate together, coordinate, and look at what needs to be done and when, and sort of touch base on that. So yeah, really like that you mentioned those things. I think they're really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you
Um,
want to talk about the other barriers that parents face in the workplace?
yeah. Yeah. So I think, probably the biggest barriers that parents face is there's a lot of communication barriers there. So I'm just like looking at my notes again because I want to make sure I cover it all.
Totally.
Um, but like one of the components there is family benefits for all. So
Mm,
we talked about that piece is like when you go, parents in the workplace are not getting the benefits, those family benefits in general. I'm talking in general. Not every organization is like this. There are some progressive ones, but in general, this is a barrier. In addition to that, um, supportive benefits for this transition, like becoming a parent and transitioning
mm,
back to work and beyond. That first year is a very fragile year
yeah.
for parents, specifically that first year. It's like I'll talk to parents and they'll be 9 months through the process and they're like, Kim, I don't understand. I just like, I feel foggy or I'm
Yeah.
just not like fully there. And I was like, you're exhausted. Like, no, you're not out of this yet.
Yeah.
Give yourself a
Yeah.
break.
I know.
You're like, what's wrong with me? Well, no, there's nothing wrong with you.
This
You
is
just had a
normal.
baby. Like,
Yeah.
this is totally fine. And we have to normalize that because we think like, oh, we have to be back like this,
Yes.
and that's not real. I think the other component is that management is inconsistent. So there's no across the board, this is how we approach family benefits, and this is how you communicate them, and this is how you support them, and this is what you do. So it's sort of like left up to the manager. So one of the most common things I hear is, I have a manager that doesn't have kids, so they don't understand.
Yeah.
Or I have a manager that has kids, but they're much older and they like didn't get any support, so they have no leeway for me.
Yeah.
And so, if you get that sweet spot of someone that gets it and understands it and really appreciates, that's great. But the
Yeah,
problem is it's completely inconsistent for organizations. You're sort of like leaving it up to like whether the manager has the experience in this and their own personal experience versus having
so
some sort
true.
of like standardized system on how to approach this and checks and balances. So there's none of that. So that's a barrier for an employee also.
Yeah. I
So, and then I would say the last piece is building transparency with leadership. So if you see a leader, this is a barrier in the sense if you see leadership that doesn't take parental leave, that comes back after 2 weeks,
yeah,
that doesn't show that it's okay. This is a big issue for men who want to take parental leave because men are sort of having to come back super early because it's,
yes.
while the parental leave policy might say, yes, you have 4 weeks, it's not really 4 weeks. It's like,
Kimberly, this was us. This was my husband. My
yeah,
husband had 6 weeks parental leave. He took 14 days, 2 weeks. And
see,
I had a emergency C-section. And I remember at the time thinking, I don't understand why you are not taking more time. And what he just kept saying is, I can't do it. He did not feel supported to take that time. He felt nervous, like if he took that time, he would not have job security. And I ended up shifting to a part-time role, so we really needed his income, and he just did not feel secure enough in the role at that company at the time. And this is like nine years ago, to take the leave. And luckily, now I think it's a bit better than it was, almost a decade ago. But men often feel this way, like they just cannot take the time because it would be a ding against them.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and it happens, and it's funny because I'll hear conversations of on the flip side of like mothers being like, well, my boss only took 2 weeks, so she's
Totally.
so it's not like
Totally.
gender specific.
Absolutely.
And it's just so it's like this is why that standardization would be so key, and that's why
Yeah.
we offer that at Learning Motherhood to create some standards to train your managers, have them all on the same page, put together some of these things, and support HR with this because they're so busy. And
Yes.
you can't just fix, you've got to fix it at all levels. You can't just try to fix it by slapping on parental leave. That's not enough.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. How do you have any effective communication strategy tips for parents, mothers specifically, who are trying to communicate their needs to their employer?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I would say is you kind of have to take off the hat of like, if you're thinking, well, I deserve this, I need this. If they don't give this to me, I'm leaving. First of all, you do deserve this, but if you're going to really create a nice dialogue where you're both going to have a good conversation, it's not a great tactic to come in with that. So, what you want to do is come in with a more collaborative um, environment that you're sort of fostering. And that comes from doing your own research on like what you're looking to get out of that meeting. So maybe you're saying, I want to propose a flexible schedule for the first month. If you're going to do something like that, you want to make sure that you really map out how that's going to look. Showing you are doing that and really building it out is demonstrating your commitment to the organization.
Mhm.
It's saying like, listen, I do want to be here. I do want to support the organization. I want to come back to work. My career is important to me. This is how I think I can best serve the organization and be a part of, participating in the position that I have, knowing I have to return in the timeline of whatever it is, but also navigate all the things that we talked about that are major issues that happen for us when we transition back. And
Yes.
so if you say, I always like simply put in the what's in it for them.
Yes.
Make sure you put in the with them, and then you're going to get more of a likelihood of their buy-in for it. Two other things that people leave out of this. One is schedule a meeting. Make sure it's scheduled. It's actually on calendar. Make sure that if it's a phone call versus in person or a Zoom call, whatever it may be, make sure that you document that with an email back, making sure that both of you are on the same communication. Because I could have this like great conversation,
Yes.
and then I ended, I'm like, okay, we're great. And then like 3 weeks later, it's like, okay, well, we can't do that transition that you talked about. And I'm like, wait, I'm confused. I thought we were on the same
Yeah.
page. Avoid that confusion on communication. Make it very clear.
Yeah, I like that in the follow-up response in an email. So you have a paper trail and you
Mhm.
also, I'm assuming, outline everything that was discussed and what was agreed,
Exactly.
like bullet points. This is what we
Yes.
said. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Um, can you talk a little bit about if you have any strategies? And I know we're getting closer and closer to time, but a lot of mothers would like to have a work from home situation. Uh, if there is, for those mothers who are trying to talk to their employers and navigate that request, do you have any recommendations there?
Yeah, I think you have to do a similar thing of what we were just talking about, which
Mhm,
is really show what your day to day is going to look like.
mhm.
So like when I went back to work with my first son, I negotiated Mondays and Fridays at home. This was like
Yep.
pre-COVID, you know.
Yes.
Um, and so what I said, I mapped out is like what I'm doing on Mondays and what I'm doing on Fridays and what Tuesday through Thursday look like. So Mondays and Fridays were my internal meetings with my team. I had a team of employees underneath me. And then also like any internal meetings I needed to put together in my company. In addition to that, I invited my boss to some of those. So it demonstrated like, hey, you can come join. Like it's fine. Um, and then Tuesday through Thursday were my out of office. I was on meetings with my team members, client facing times. And I made that very clear. And so I had like really thought about it. And so it
Yeah,
was easy for them to approve it at that point because they thought, okay, that makes sense, like scheduling wise and productive wise. And like, why don't you want to be in the office? Well, because my team knocks on my door the entire time and
totally.
I'm going to make time for them
Yeah,
Tuesday through Thursday. I'm also going to have that communication with them in between that with the internal meetings I'm doing. So I'm like checking all the boxes, still saying hi, high communication for everyone, and then inviting them to some of those meetings for my boss that demonstrates the value there too.
yeah, and they can sort of check in and feel like they're on the same page, even though they don't see you all the time, which I think
Exactly.
is for a lot of employers, like, and for a lot of leadership, that's kind of important. They just need to have eyes on you once in a while, or else they feel like they almost don't have oversight on everything that's going on.
Yeah, and just speaking as being a leader, one of the things that I always say to other leaders is like, listen, like it's glaring if someone's not doing their work. Like
Totally.
you don't need to micromanage that. Like it is obvious. And
Yeah.
so when you become a micromanager, you lose sight of like the importance of and trust that you're building with your employees. So you lose it.
Yeah.
It's gone. So you have to be able to have that trust. And if you don't have that trust, then that's time for a different conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I did want to touch on mothers who want to continue professional development during and after their return to the workplace. I think sometimes that's really hard. I know for me in my own experience that after I had kids, unfortunately, for a little while, my career sort of took a back seat and that professional development slowed with it. So I don't know if you have any advice here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
So, coming from someone that thought very similar prior to baby, was very like yes to everything, yes to every opportunity, always like going above and beyond, joining every like optional meeting, like whatever it was, I was there. And then after having kids, really having to be more thoughtful about what I was doing. This is going to sound out of the ordinary, but one piece of advice I would give is like professional development also includes boundaries.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
really
Yes.
building out your boundaries is demonstrating leadership quality. And I wish I had known that and learned that prior to baby, but I certainly learned it after. And what it does is it demonstrates your time is valuable, and the time we have is going to be valuable. Outside of that, we're going to move on. And so you get real clear, and that helps build up that professional development. So when I say that, I'm like, things that you can work on during this time where maybe you can't say yes to everything and you can't do all the things that you used to before, is really working on organization and developing how to say no to things and developing what things to say yes on.
Mhm.
And then the last component to that is asking for mentorship. Look at someone that you really admire or connect with that is a parent that has gone into leadership. Prior to baby, I had the opportunity to connect with a senior leader in the organization I worked with, which was like a Fortune 100 company. So to be able to like go to the big office, go up to like the top level there was just an amazing thing. And it was because I asked. I was like, I want to talk to someone that is a parent that has gone up the ranks and how they did it. I want to see how they
Yeah.
did it.
Yes.
And in that conversation, the one thing she said to me is don't apologize, stop saying you're sorry,
Yeah.
and learn how to say no. So practice those while you're kind of like navigating those things, and ask for that mentorship. There's someone that will be willing to do it.
Yeah. And I think work culture plays such a large part in allowing parents to have boundaries. One of the things I want to talk about is how leaders can better create a work culture that's more inclusive and helps support parents, specifically moms when they return back to work. I have an example from Maple, from my current company, and our founder and CEO Michael Perry. Something that he does that I've never ever had any other leader do, which is from the very top of the organization, he sets clear boundaries when it's time for work and when it's time for him to focus on his family. And so he will let the entire organization know when he's got to go to his kid's pediatrician appointment or when it's time to sign off because he's cooking dinner for his family tonight. And it's like, hey, I might be back on later. I'll be responding to you then. But right now, I'm going to go be with my family. And that's it. And him doing that allows the rest of the organization to sort of follow suit, which is really, really nice. So I thought that that was just so refreshing. And I don't know if you have any other advice for how leaders can sort of create that culture of transparency and inclusivity.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of them. I love that he does that, and I
Yeah.
was so excited when I heard him sharing that. That was
Mhm.
like that we have to do that. We have to feel comfortable doing that.
Especially from men,
Yes.
especially from men. Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
And so the other pieces are, how can you build this inclusive parental leave? Really providing supportive care for parents,
Mm,
navigating this transition. It is very fragile when
yeah.
you're transitioning to being a parent. And so getting that support, whether it's their first, second, third, fourth baby, providing services like Learning Motherhood offers, hugely important for this stage. In addition to that, childcare subsidies, any sort of component that you can do, even if it's a small amount, at least it's there for them to learn and grow from in terms of what they have accessibility to and support. There are some incredible organizations, childcare organizations, that are building out corporate programming, and it's really amazing to see. And I think the last one I had was actually the flexible work schedules, which is what Michael talks so eloquently about. So yeah.
Yeah. Yep. We have what's called family flex at Maple. And so you have flexible working hours where there's a period of time that we're all on together. And we
Mhm.
have the whole company's remote, right? So we have different employees in different time zones. So it's just a really nice way to sort of bring us all together. And we're able to collaborate and communicate really effectively and quickly and sort of move as a team together. And then there's the hours that are flexible. So parents don't have to choose between a super important meeting and maybe going to their child's recital. And I think that's like a really progressive, really innovative way to sort of structure hours for remote company. Kind of cool.
Yeah, especially
Yeah,
when like different time zones, the whole component. So it's
yeah,
amazing. I love
yeah,
that. I
yeah. It's
love
very
that.
thoughtful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you do get a lot of times. I mean, because it's so flexible and it works for me, I leave at like 3:30, pick up the kids, do that. And then I come back on like 7:30. My husband does bedtime and I'm upstairs like getting to the emails that I missed and structuring my day for tomorrow. So, but I just think work life at home looks so different than it does inside the office.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
But like you're choosing that.
that's
That's,
exactly right.
right.
That's exactly,
So I think giving the choice
that's
to
right.
how that structure looks for you, like maybe someone else is like, I'm going to just have them go to aftercare and finish up
Totally.
my day because I can't function at 7 o'clock looking at email.
Yeah.
And versus, this actually works better for you to just sign off and then I'll look at it later. And so I think that is the beauty of what Maple has created in terms of the employee support. It's great.
Yeah, it's so awesome. As we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or key messages that you want to share for mothers who are, preparing for returning back to work?
Yeah, just know that your voice matters. You can ask. If you don't ask, you'll never know. So you might have just listened to this incredible offering of what Maple does. You never know until you ask to see if that's something that you could do, or a version of that, as we talked about advocating for like working from home or flex schedule, whatever that is. You don't know until you ask. Secondly, is do your research. Really like take this ownership onto your experience with baby, with your partner, or with family, whomever's supporting you. Do your research so that you can find the best fit for you for this time period. And lastly, know that like if the organization doesn't embrace this and support you, that doesn't mean you have to say no to your career. You just say yes to the right opportunity that will be there to support you, and know that your career can exist and you can also have a family. If you choose to, you can do both. It's just finding the right fit and making sure your voice is heard and finding out what works best for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I also want to add, just for new parents who have never been through this before, you have a time period. Excuse me, there is a time period when baby's new and you're sort of settling. But that doesn't last forever. I mean, I have two kids now in elementary school, and my days look completely different than they did back then. So, this isn't forever. It's not the rest of your life. There is a sort of start and stop date that you're going to need a lot of flexibility and support, and it will get easier. It does get easier.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Thank you, Kimberly, and Learning Motherhood. Thank you so much for coming on. I super appreciate your insights and sharing everything with us. I hope everybody has a good day, and we will all talk soon.
Yes, thank you so much. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.